Over the past 24 hours, we've seen what happens when the incredibly emboldened and arrogant GOP runs face first into a wall of popular resistance to its corrupt agenda. So the first day, basically, of the new year, their first opportunity to legislate, what do? Well, without any warning whatsoever, and as one of their first priorities, they tried to get rid of one of the few effective checks on legislative corruption and bribery. House Republicans voted yesterday 119 to 74 to all but eliminate the Office of Congressional Ethics. So look, there were some Republicans who voted against it. Of course, it was involved in a package of other rules changes, and so many of them might have been voting for some other reason. If you're not familiar with the Office of Congressional Ethics, it's an independent office created after lobbyist Jack Abramoff pled guilty to trying to bribe members of Congress that can investigate allegations of corruption and unethical behavior and disclose its findings to the public. And thus it had to go. Because they're busy draining the swamp. They don't have room in the swamp for, a body that can investigate corruption.
Right. Now,
some sort of weird little bit. We're going to give you all the details on what they tried to do and what ended up happening, because there is a good end to this story. But what's your first reaction?
Right. Just to give you guys some more information about, the Office of Congressional Ethics. It's an independent body, so it's independent of Congress, and that's important because in order to investigate possible ethics violations that are taking place among members of Congress, you have to make sure that the body is independent, right? Yeah. And so it was really difficult to pass legislation that would create this organization. In fact, it barely passed. It was after the midterm elections in 2006 when the Democrats took hold of Congress and they pushed for it, and it passed barely 207 to 206, so one vote. Okay, so we know members of Congress don't like it. And look, a lot of our focus right now is going to be about how Republicans specifically wanted to dismantle it, take away power from it. But Democrats have complained about it as well because, again, it's an independent body that investigates unethical behavior by members of Congress.
Exactly.
And so Alan Grayson was targeted by this organization, and there have been a lot of other Democrats who hate it.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's important to have it, and Republicans wanted to do away with it.
Yeah, and what's sort of funny is that in the wake of them making that rules change, even Jack Abramoff is speaking out against it, among many, saying, while there seems to be little question that some of the procedures of the Office of Congressional Ethics can and probably have created collateral political problems for innocent members of Congress, boo-hoo, moving to diminish oversight is exactly the opposite of what Congress should be doing. So what did they actually want to do? What are the significant changes that would have been made? BuzzFeed did a great job of putting together just some of the rules changes you're going to see in this graphic right here. Okay, so the OC should no longer be independent. Instead, it will answer to the House Committee on Ethics, which is run by members of Congress, specifically the leadership of Congress, which is Republicans. So it would have been investigating Republicans and answering to Republicans. It would have no longer been able to accept anonymous tips from whistleblowers, and that might at first seem to make sense. Shouldn't they have to put their face to an accusation? Well, maybe, but if they do, then there can be political reprisals from members of the Republican leadership of the House, if they're a member of staff or something like that. The Ethics Office, that's the House Ethics Office, under the Republican control, can simply stop any investigation of that Ethics Office if they want to. So they can just shut down any investigation that they don't like, for instance, perhaps if they're investigating a Republican. They can't investigate any tips on misconduct that took place before January 3rd, 2011.
That's insane.
I don't even understand.
That's insane.
Why not? Why not? They can't talk publicly about their findings. They can't make public what they find out or even hire a spokesperson. They can only communicate, again, with the Republican leadership of the House. And if they find any evidence of criminal wrongdoing, they can't turn it over to law enforcement. They can only turn it over to the House Ethics Committee, which will then eliminate the investigation.
So again, understand this is gutting, the OC just to ensure that they have no power. They can't really investigate properly. They can't really
or if they do, nothing comes of it.
Nothing comes of it, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. So think about the legalized bribery that we have in this country, how we have legalized certain forms of corruption, and that's still not good enough. The very little we have in protecting the American people and ensuring that members of Congress represent us to some degree is something that's being attacked by members of Congress, by Republicans specifically in this case. Now, to be fair to Democrats, as I mentioned, they also don't like this, this group of people who are investigating them, which, by the way, is made up of 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, neither of which are for federal employees. But they've never taken a vote to dismantle it.
Yeah.
So you got to give them a little bit of credit for that. But it's just incredible.
They just want to.
The legalized bribery, not enough. The
Exactly.
fact that you can take unlimited amounts of money from corporations, which obviously influence your policy decisions and the way you vote and the way you represent Americans, still not good enough. You want to do away with any protections for American people.
And by the way, if those changes that they were going to make weren't enough, this is so petty, this last change that I want to talk about, that I didn't even think it was real. I checked multiple sources to make sure this was true because it seems so incredibly childish and petty. They were also going to change the name of the committee from the Office of Congressional Ethics to the Office of Congressional Complaint Review.
It's insane.
So it's not that they're investigating ethical violations and corruption, it's just people who are complaining. Man, look, when I started this off saying that they're emboldened and arrogant, I'm not just exaggerating or just being partisan. They're salivating over what they're going to be able to do now that they're in charge and now that the executive branch and soon the judicial branch are also going to be controlled by Republicans. And studies have shown when they've looked at corruption is that corruption spreads. When government officials see that other government officials are accepting bribes or engaging in shady behavior, then very often they feel like, well, I've got to get me some too. Mm-hmm. And when they see what Trump is already prepped to do and how he's not going to do anything to minimize his conflicts of interest, they see the opportunity to get in on the looting of America too. And man, so we stopped them now because after all of the pushback, they decided to not go ahead with it. So the House Republicans voted yesterday to shut it down, but before it could go to a vote in the full House, they decided to take it away.
Yes.
Only because everybody breathed down their neck about it. But they did say to a reporter for the Washington Post that they're expecting that once the publicity dies down, then they're going to try to bring it back, which means that we need to be vigilant.
We do need to be vigilant. That's a great point. But there are those who understand that there are political ramifications in voting in favor of this type of behavior, right? And so even Paul Ryan was against this. He was one of the few who decided, no, I'm voting against it because it's a bad idea. It's going to look bad. And so it's interesting.
But after it passed, he did say something about how hey, it's not the end of the world and
No. I know that, right? But I'm not saying this because I think he's a good guy or because he's actually against dismantling the OC. I'm saying this because he at least understands what the potential ramifications would be in the future. You mentioned how some people feel emboldened to do whatever the hell they want at this point because of the behavior of Trump. And to some extent, I think that's true, but it's also interesting to see how Trump seems to get away with anything and everything. But members of Congress still have to abide by the same type of standards that Americans had for Congress prior to Trump. Because
but we'll see how those hold up.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Now, does Trump deserve any of the credit for shutting down of the Office of Congressional Ethics? A lot of reports about this whole thing over the past 24 hours have said, well, he tweeted saying that he was against it, and so maybe he's the reason it was shut down and not, many different non-governmental organizations and citizens' rights groups and things like that, the League of Women Voters, all these different groups and individuals speaking out against it. Don't worry about them. It was probably just Trump. Let's evaluate that. So here are the tweets that Trump sent out. With all that Congress has to work on, do they really have to make the weakening of the independent ethics watchdog, which is not what it's called, as unfair as it may be, their number one act and priority? Focus on tax reform, health care, and so many other things of far greater importance. So look, he's getting a lot of credit because on some level, and I'll give him 5% credit, because on some level, he's sort of saying, at the very least, don't do it now. But in that, he not only got the name of the organization wrong, so it shows that he doesn't even really care about this.
Yeah.
2, he said it's an unfair organization, which means that he's at least on some level against it. And 3, he only said don't do it now. Do other things first. So if they bring it back in 6 months, these tweets are actually supportive of that action.
Well, here's another takeaway from his tweets, which, by the way, I find it hilarious that our president-elect refuses to do press conferences and just communicates with everyone in 140 characters or less.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, he does not have the Republicans back, right? He will throw them under the bus the second he sees that they're a liability, right? The second he sees that a decision that they've made makes him look bad. And so I love seeing how, certain members of Congress have conceded or they've tucked tail and ended up supporting him. And he'll just slap him in the face as soon as it's convenient and right for him to do so. Right?
There's some schadenfreude there,
exactly,
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, now look, so as we said, the happy ending to this is that they're not going to go forward with it right now. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't time for a lot of Republicans to get on the record as being for this, including, which seems odd since he's getting all of this credit, Donald Trump is, for being against this, including Kellyanne Conway, who defended it, as you're going to see in this video.
I don't want your viewers to be left with the impression that there's no mechanism to investigate ethics complaints, particularly ethics complaints that come from constituents, which the former office has been entertaining. This was in reaction to a 2008 scandal. There have been about 100 or so complaints since, only a third of which have been referred to the House Ethics Committee. And I think one thing that they're trying to curb is the abuse of the process that has led to some of those being investigated, either House members or their staffers and witnesses. Some of them have complained that they've been denied or had their due process rights compromised. So a more fair process, you can't have, if this actually passes in full, Joe, you could not have an anonymous tip anymore. If you want to come forward as a constituent, you can do that, but you have to show some evidence. You have to show some grounding. And
but isn't that a problem, not being able to have an anonymous tip coming in?
I don't want people to feel like ethics is gone. I mean, there are many ways for constituents, particularly, to make their voices and their
So
concerns.
let's just talk about.
Wow, those strong words. I don't want people to think that ethics are gone necessarily. So look, she sounds very reasonable there, and I think a lot of people will hear that and think, well, the anonymous thing, like if you don't think about the fact that it's not constituents generally who are reporting this stuff, it's people with inside information from their staff that need the anonymity to be able to do it without their career being destroyed. She seems reasonable, but what she's saying there is, it's not a big deal that they're going to destroy this commission.
No, it's a huge deal. And I don't understand why they have something. Well, I do understand why they're against the anonymity in tips, but they have to provide evidence either way. Like, you can't just show up and tell the OCE, hey, guess what? I think that Representative Charles Rangel, which, by the way, is a Democrat who is also against the committee. It's not like they can just tell the committee that he did something wrong.
Took a bribe or something.
Yeah, took a bribe, and there's no evidence behind it, and then Rangel has to deal with the ramifications of that. No, of course they have to provide evidence.
Exactly.
Of course, even if they don't provide evidence and it's just a tip, it's not like, the OCE just decides, all right, we're going to punish you with no evidence whatsoever. This is all BS. Congress doesn't like it because it is a way of ensuring that they behave ethically, and they don't want to behave ethically.
Exactly.
A lot of them don't want to.
Yeah, they're feeling big, like too big for their britches, and they don't like even the possibility that an organization could provide a check for that power. Another example of it is Steve King, a Republican of Iowa, who said he would now work to completely abolish the Office of Congressional Ethics, citing concerns over anonymous whistleblowers again, making accusations against members, and the OCE leaking information to the press. Asked to provide an example of the OCE leaking information to the press, King failed to come up with one and got testy and said, just Google it. Why don't you Google it? You got a smartphone. If you're going to be making a case that this organization should be destroyed because they're just leaking all this false information, and you can't come up with one example for it, maybe that shouldn't be the basis for you being in favor of its abolition, or abolishment, I should say. Yeah. So anyway, good end to that, I suppose, although, again, it's probably only a time thing. It puts off the date of its destruction because they are ready to just start gobbling up all that money from as many lobbyists and businesses as they can.
Fix the media. Be the media. Come join us. tytnetwork.com/join.